They told you the smartest way to love your grandkids is to leave them money. I disagree. In fact, the wrong kind of inheritance can quietly destroy the very people you're trying to protect. It can make them entitled, dependent, and emotionally fragile. And research keeps proving this. Today, I'll show you a better way. One that not only protects your wealth, but actually strengthens the minds, habits, and emotional resilience of your grandchildren. So, if you've worked your whole life to build something worth passing on, stay with me, because I'm about to tell you what most financial planners never will. Most people think inheritance is about numbers, but it's really about neurology and psychology. Money doesn't just change a person's wallet, it rewires the brain. When someone receives a sudden windfall, especially without having earned it, dopamine spikes. That's the same neurotransmitter triggered by gambling and addictive behavior. And once the brain adapts to unearned rewards, it starts to expect them. Motivation drops, stress tolerance weakens, and long-term satisfaction declines. Recent research on what's called sudden wealth syndrome shows that people who receive large inheritances often experience anxiety, guilt, and impulsive decision-making within months. Their prefrontal cortex, the brain's control center for judgment, is overstimulated by novelty and risk. That's why so many lottery winners and trust fund heirs end up losing it all. The issue isn't greed, it's neurochemistry. If you're a grandparent, that should make you pause, because your gift, meant as love, might be sabotaging your grandchild's mental wiring. So the question isn't how much to give. The real question is how to give in a way that develops character rather than weakens it. When I started coaching retirees years ago, one of my clients, a retired surgeon, told me, "I just want my grandkids to have it easier than I did." He left them over $2 million. Within 5 years, one dropped out of college, another burned through her share on luxury cars, and a third stopped speaking to the family after a fight over what she called unfair distributions. That family is still fractured, not because of greed, but because no one ever talked about the emotional meaning of money. I learned then, inheritance isn't a transaction, it's a message. And if you don't write that message clearly, confusion fills the silence. Let me ask you, where are you? Watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. I love knowing how far this conversation travels, because these lessons apply anywhere money and love intersect. Now, here's the counterintuitive truth. The smartest inheritance isn't a check, it's conditioning. You want to design an inheritance that activates responsibility, gratitude, and self-mastery. Let's talk about how that works, both psychologically and biologically. From a psychological standpoint, your grandchildren's sense of self-worth is shaped by what researchers call earned success. This means people derive emotional stability not from the amount of money they have, but from the sense that they've contributed or achieved something meaningful. When you remove the need to earn, you remove a key source of dopamine regulation. It's the struggle, not the reward, that builds confidence. Biologically, this connects to the brain's reward prediction mechanism. The ventral striatum fires not when you get a reward, but when you anticipate earning one. That anticipation regulates motivation. If your grandkids always expect something for nothing, their motivation circuits dull over time. So, ironically, the more you give, the less they may feel capable of creating. Now let me explain the first core strategy: gradual conditioning through structured trust funds. Forget the old model where you dump a lump sum into a will. Modern estate planning uses what's called incentive-based trusts. You define clear milestones: finishing college, starting a business, volunteering, maintaining employment, and distributions happen when those milestones are met. Research shows this approach reduces entitlement by keeping the dopamine effort balance intact. Your grandkids still get rewards, but their brain connects it with achievement. You're teaching them that wealth is relational, not automatic. And let me tell you something else. When grandparents use language like, "I want you to have a safety net," the subconscious message can become, "I don't think you can handle life without me." That undermines confidence. But when you say, "I want you to have tools to build on what I started," you engage the brain's growth mindset circuitry. Same intention, a different neurological impact. So here's my second strategy. Turn your inheritance into an education project, not a handout. Instead of leaving cash, create a family learning endowment. This can fund skill programs, travel, entrepreneurship courses, or therapy. Money spent on learning has a high psychological return because it ties wealth to growth. A recent Harvard happiness study found that the strongest predictor of life satisfaction wasn't income, but mastery. The sense of improving at something meaningful. You can bake that into your inheritance. You're not just giving, you're sculpting their mental architecture. Let me share another story. A grandmother I coached, a retired psychologist like many of you, wanted to leave her 3 grandsons something they couldn't blow. I helped her create what she called the Legacy Lab. Each grandson got $50,000, but they had to pitch a community project, document the process, and present what they learned after a year. One created a mobile literacy bus, another started a food co-op, the third failed his first project, learned from it, and started again. 2 years later, she told me, "That's the best therapy I've ever given anyone." That's legacy done right. I know some of you are wondering, but what if they just waste it anyway? That's a fair concern. Let me explain what happens neurologically when people inherit too early. Before about age 25, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for long-term planning, isn't fully mature. That's why sudden access to wealth can mimic addictive behavior. A smart move is to delay major distributions until 30 or beyond. Let them build neural pathways for discipline first. Another key principle: teach financial literacy while you're alive. Don't surprise them with money they never learned to handle. I've seen families where the inheritance came with handwritten letters explaining values, spending principles, and emotional guidance. Those letters often mattered more than the money itself. Studies in family wealth management show that values transmission is the single greatest factor in preserving wealth for more than 2 generations. Think of your legacy as part neuroscience, part storytelling. When you leave only numbers, you leave uncertainty. But when you attach stories, why you worked, what you sacrificed, what you believe, you engage the limbic brain, the part responsible for emotional memory. People forget data, but they never forget stories. So here's a challenge. Write your wealth story letter. It's not about dollars, it's about meaning. Tell your grandkids how money showed up in your life, what it taught you, how it tested you, how it freed or trapped you. Neuroscience confirms that emotional narratives imprint longer than abstract advice. That letter can be the emotional immune system that protects them from entitlement. Now, let's talk about another dimension few people discuss: biological inheritance. I don't mean genetics, I mean emotional epigenetics. We now know stress patterns and emotional behaviors can be transmitted across generations through hormone regulation. If your relationship with money has been defined by fear, scarcity, or guilt, you might unconsciously pass that forward. Leaving money without addressing those emotional patterns can magnify them. Recent research on intergenerational trauma shows that unresolved anxiety, even about finances, alters cortisol sensitivity in descendants. So, before you transfer wealth, transfer peace. That means having the uncomfortable conversations now. Let your family see that money is a tool, not a test of worth. Here's a technique that works. Sit down with your grandchildren and ask, "What would you do if I left you $50,000 tomorrow?" Don't judge their answers, just listen. Their response reveals their money mindset, whether it's driven by fear, fantasy, or purpose. You can use that as a teaching moment. This strengthens the prefrontal amygdala connection, the part of the brain responsible for balancing emotion and logic. Inheritance becomes an exercise in maturity, not materialism. I can almost hear some of you saying, "But I worked hard so they wouldn't have to struggle." Let me be clear. Struggle isn't the enemy. Chaos is. Struggle is the gym that builds resilience. The smartest inheritance gives them weights to lift, not walls to crash through. Let's go deeper. Why do so many wealthy families lose their fortunes by the 3rd generation? It's called the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves phenomenon. And it's not superstition, it's psychology. The first generation fights for survival. Their brains wire for effort and delayed gratification. The second generation inherits security but still sees the struggle. They balance ambition with caution. The third generation grows up comfortable, and the brain adapts to comfort by lowering vigilance and risk assessment. That's not moral decay, it's neurological adaptation. Your goal is to disrupt that pattern. You do it by designing rituals that reactivate effort and gratitude. Examples: family volunteering days, requiring grandchildren to co-manage small charitable funds or making them part of family financial decisions. Neuroscience calls this experiential encoding. We learn best through lived experiences, not lectures. Now, let's address one more dangerous myth: that giving while you're alive makes you seem controlling. I've heard that from dozens of retirees, but research in positive psychology shows that shared giving, philanthropy done as a family, increases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. That means giving now can actually make your relationships warmer, not colder. Don't wait for your will to be the last word. One man I coached started an annual family investment day. Every year, each member pitched an idea that could make the world a little better. He matched the winning idea with seed money. It turned into a tradition. His grandkids said it made them feel seen, not spoiled. That's what smart inheritance feels like. Participation, not passivity. So, how much should you actually leave? There's no perfect number, but there is a guiding principle. Leave enough to help them start, not enough to make them stop. Financial planners sometimes call this the freedom threshold. You want your grandkids to feel empowered, not anesthetized. Now let's talk practical tactics. This is the part where I want you to take notes. First, if you haven't already, create a living trust. This lets you manage how assets are distributed, avoiding probate and public exposure. Second, add those incentive conditions we discussed. Make achievements part of the release process. Third, pair every major financial gift with an educational or emotional component. For example, if you're giving them a property, have them attend a landlord management course first. Fourth, create emotional buffers. This means having a neutral financial advisor or family trustee act as the coach figure who enforces boundaries. It keeps your role relational, not administrative. Fifth, ensure your inheritance plan includes mentorship. Pair them with someone who can teach them how to use wealth wisely. Studies show that mentorship doubles the likelihood that inherited wealth leads to long-term stability. And here's something people forget. The brain's reward system resets faster than you think. If your grandkids get a big payout, their emotional high will last weeks, maybe months. Then baseline happiness returns. But if you build recurring engagement, annual family projects, educational rewards, personal growth milestones, you're creating what neuroscientists call sustained dopaminergic engagement. That's a fancy way of saying you're training the brain to associate joy with progress, not possession. You see where this is going? Legacy isn't about outliving your life. It's about outlasting your influence. Now let me leave you with a story that sums this up. Years ago, a retired psychologist I met at a conference told me his father left him one thing, a handwritten journal called Lessons I Bought with Pain. Each page was a mistake and what it taught him. No money, no real estate, just wisdom. That psychologist went on to build a multi-million-dollar practice. When I asked why, he said, "Because my father made me feel like the story wasn't over." That's the inheritance your grandkids really want, to feel like the story isn't over. So, here's your action plan. 1. Write your wealth story letter this month. 2. Talk to your financial advisor about converting any lump sum plans into incentive-based trusts. 3. Schedule one conversation with your grandchildren about money, not about rules, but about dreams. 4. Design one family ritual that connects money with meaning. It could be philanthropy, education, or storytelling. And finally, 5. Start giving now, in small doses with guidance. Let them grow under your watchful eye. You'll get to see them make mistakes, adjust, and mature, which means you're not just leaving wealth, you're teaching wisdom. Excellent. I'll expand the script to 7,000 words total by adding about 3,000 more words in cohesive, meaningful segments, maintaining the same wise yet tough love tone, grounded in neuroscience, psychology, and real-life coaching stories. Here's part 1 of the expansion, 1,000 words. I'll build upon the existing ideas with richer examples, deeper biological explanations, and actionable frameworks. Let's go a little deeper, because the real reason most inheritances fail isn't just about money. It's about the invisible emotional contract between generations, the expectations, assumptions, and unspoken lessons that come with every dollar. Most grandparents underestimate how powerful those emotional contracts are. When you give money, you're also giving identity cues. Neuroscience shows that every financial transaction triggers what's called self-referential processing. It means the brain automatically asks, "What does this say about me?" If your grandchild receives an inheritance and subconsciously answers, "It says I'm special," you've built entitlement. But if they answer, "It says I'm trusted," you've built empowerment. Here's what I teach my private coaching clients. Before leaving a single dollar, define the emotion you want that dollar to carry. Is it love, encouragement, pride, opportunity? Whatever you choose will unconsciously transfer along with the wealth. When you're intentional about that message, you're not just distributing assets, you're transmitting values through emotion. And yes, that's not philosophy, it's biology. Emotional associations are stored in the hippocampus and amygdala, which are also involved in memory formation. That's why people remember how money made them feel more than what they actually did with it. I had a client named Henry, an engineer, who told me he planned to leave each grandchild a house. I asked him, "What do you want that house to mean?" He looked puzzled. He said, "A place they'll never be homeless." I said, "Good. But what if that house also means you never trusted them to build their own shelter?" He blinked, then paused. A week later, he changed his plan. He created a home creation fund, giving each grandchild the chance to design, invest, or co-own a starter home, but only after contributing a down payment they'd earned. Years later, his oldest granddaughter told me, "I feel like my grandpa gave me permission to believe I could build." That's how emotional meaning changes everything. Now let's talk about what happens biologically when you give too much, too soon. When people receive unearned wealth, their serotonin baseline rises temporarily. Serotonin, the neurotransmitter associated with mood and confidence, signals the body that all needs are met. The problem? It reduces the urgency to pursue challenges, and without challenge, the brain's neuroplasticity, its ability to grow and adapt, begins to slow. You can literally make your descendants neurologically softer by overprotecting them. We see this in modern psychology under what's called the overhelping phenomenon. When older generations remove all friction from life for the younger ones, they unintentionally rob them of the biological benefits of problem solving, dopamine regulation, cortisol modulation, and the emotional satisfaction that comes from mastery. That's why the smartest grandparents I know don't protect their grandkids from every struggle. They curate the right kind of struggle. One woman I coached, a retired school principal, decided her grandkids would receive their inheritance in stages, but each stage required them to submit a life report. She said, "I want to see what they've learned, not just what they've earned." The report wasn't formal, just a written reflection of how they used the previous amount. It forced accountability. Within 3 years, her oldest grandson told her he started journaling every month because of that. He said it helped him think clearly about money. That's not luck, that's neuroplasticity in action. Think about your own life. How many of your best lessons came from comfort? Probably none. Comfort preserves. Discomfort develops. The brain grows under challenge, the same way muscles grow under weight. So if you want your inheritance to truly bless your grandkids, make sure it works out their brain. Attach purpose, challenge, and creativity. Let's also talk about something people rarely address: how grief interacts with inheritance. When you pass, your loved one's brains are already flooded with cortisol, the stress hormone. Decision-making drops, emotional memory spikes, and people cling to symbols of security, like money or property, as stand-ins for love. That's why so many family feuds erupt after a death. It's not greed, it's biology, confusing loss of love with loss of control. To prevent that, you must separate emotion from administration while you're alive. Bring your family into the process. Let them ask questions. Let them see your intentions clearly. Transparency reduces the amygdala's fear response, and when you're gone, your wealth becomes a comfort, not a battlefield. I tell clients, don't let your will speak louder than your voice, because the written word without emotional context can be misinterpreted. If you're still with me, tell me in the comments, have you ever seen a family torn apart by inheritance fights? I guarantee you're not alone. It's one of the most painful patterns I've witnessed in over 30 years of coaching. Now, another layer, the psychology of legacy visibility. Research shows that when people know they're being remembered, they behave more responsibly. It's called the legacy motive. You can use this to shape how your grandkids handle their inheritance. Create visible accountability, name scholarships, projects, or family traditions in ways that carry your name or values. Not out of vanity, but because the human brain craves connection to identity. When your grandkids can literally see your values attached to something alive, they internalize them faster. One of my clients set up a Grandma May Leadership Award for high school students who showed compassion and community involvement. Every year, her grandkids help select the winner. They told me it makes them feel like grandma's still teaching them how to lead. That's inheritance at its highest level, wealth that continues to educate emotion. So far, we've talked about incentive-based giving, emotional conditioning, and neurological health. But let's go even deeper into how your grandkids' nervous systems respond to money anxiety. Studies show that financial uncertainty activates the sympathetic nervous system, the body's fight-or-flight mechanism. But generational wealth, when structured right, can do the opposite. It can anchor the parasympathetic system, the one responsible for calm, connection, and long-term thinking. That's why the tone you set in your giving matters. If your inheritance feels anxious, rushed, secretive, guilt-ridden, it triggers survival responses. But if it feels calm, deliberate, and clear, it signals safety. The body literally relaxes. The next generation associates money with trust, not fear. So when you talk to your family about inheritance, do it in a calm, unrushed space. Maybe a quiet dinner, maybe a shared vacation. The brain encodes emotions tied to surroundings. If you deliver legacy conversations under stress, the emotional memory becomes contaminated by tension. But if you do it during peace, the association remains soothing for decades. All this might sound overly psychological, but trust me, it's what separates families who grow together from those who fall apart. Perfect. Here's part 2 of the expansion, 1,000 words, continuing in the same direct, story-driven voice with a mix of neuroscience, psychology, and real-world coaching insights. Let's talk about what I call behavioral inheritance, because at the end of the day, what your grandchildren remember won't be your money. It'll be the emotional habits they learned by watching how you handled it. Every time they saw you tip generously, save carefully, or handle a setback with grace, their mirror neurons were firing. Mirror neurons, those are the brain cells that help us imitate behavior and empathy, play a huge role in wealth transmission. Studies have shown that financial behavior is learned more through observation than instruction. You can tell a child about saving all day long, but if they see you panic during a market dip, that's the behavior that gets encoded. So, before leaving money, check what emotional script you're leaving. If you've lived with financial anxiety your whole life, it's time to rewrite that narrative, because otherwise they'll inherit your stress right along with your assets. I've seen clients leave millions, only for their descendants to live in constant fear of losing it all. That's not a financial problem, that's a psychological inheritance problem. Now, here's a practical system I teach, the 3-phase legacy model. It's simple but powerful, and it integrates psychology, neuroscience, and finance. Phase 1, model. This is the phase you're in now, showing your family what wealth stewardship looks like. Talk openly about your mistakes. Transparency builds trust and normalizes imperfection. Recent research in family resilience shows that children who hear about their elders' failures develop higher stress tolerance and adaptability. They learn that wealth doesn't eliminate pain, it just gives you better tools to manage it. So, model your learning curve. Don't hide the times you struggled or changed direction. Let them see the process, not just the product. Phase 2, mentor. Start mentoring them on small financial decisions while you're still here. Give them small projects to manage, an investment challenge, a charitable fund, a budget for a family trip. Observe their approach. This activates what neuroscientists call metacognitive monitoring, the ability to think about how you think. When young adults handle small money tasks under guidance, their prefrontal cortex, the area for judgment, strengthens. This is how you wire wisdom into their biology. Phase 3, multiply. Once they've proven responsibility, let them use part of your inheritance to multiply your values, not just your money. Encourage them to invest in what you stood for: education, compassion, community, integrity. That's how legacy compounds. Let me tell you a story. One of my coaching clients, a retired Navy veteran, had a granddaughter who wanted to be a nurse. He created what he called a legacy seed, $25,000 that she could use for anything related to service. He told her, "I don't care if it earns you money, I care if it earns you meaning." She used it to start a health outreach program in rural areas. Years later, that project became her full-time mission. She still says, "That money didn't make me rich. It made me capable." That's the kind of inheritance you want, one that activates purpose. Now let's get into something most people ignore: the biological rhythm of aging and decision-making. As we grow older, our dopamine receptors become less sensitive. That's one reason many retirees become more cautious with money. The brain literally perceives less reward from risk. Meanwhile, younger generations have the opposite problem. They're flooded with dopamine. They chase novelty, excitement, and instant gratification. If you hand that younger brain a large sum of money, it interprets it as a dopamine jackpot. The result? Short-term thinking. You can counteract this by building friction, not to frustrate them, but to create what we call delayed reward conditioning. For example, one of my clients structured his trust so that each year his grandchildren had to submit a gratitude statement before receiving the next installment. Sounds simple, right? But that ritual activated reflection, which neurologically strengthens the prefrontal cortex and reduces impulsivity. By year 3, his granddaughter said she spent less and saved more, not because of the trust, but because she had to think before acting. That's neuroplasticity training through money. If you're listening and thinking that this all sounds like a lot of planning, you're right, but it's worth it. Because if you don't design the system designs them. Let's take a short detour into something rarely mentioned: hormonal inheritance. Did you know that your approach to money can actually influence your grandkids' stress hormones? Studies on intergenerational epigenetics reveal that cortisol regulation, how your body handles stress, can be influenced by the emotional climate of your family. If your grandkids grow up watching you manage money with calm confidence, their nervous systems internalize that pattern. They'll face life's chaos with steadier hands. That's what I mean when I say inheritance isn't about what you leave. It's about what you leave behind in them. Now, I want you to visualize this. Imagine your grandchild, 30 years from now, sitting down with their own children. Imagine them repeating your words, your wisdom, your values. That's legacy, when your voice keeps echoing long after you're gone. But that doesn't happen automatically. You have to script it. So here's a small exercise you can do this week. Take 10 minutes and write down 3 sentences. 1. What money meant to you when you were young? 2. What money means to you now. 3. What you want money to mean for your family after you're gone. Those 3 sentences form the core of your wealth story. You can expand it into a letter or even record it as a video. The brain processes visual and auditory memories more vividly than text. Imagine your grandkids hearing your voice years from now explaining what you believe about money. That's more powerful than any will. And remember, you're not just fighting financial decay, you're fighting psychological amnesia, the tendency of each generation to forget the lessons of the last. You prevent that through storytelling. When families lose their story, they lose their strength. If you're watching this right now, comment below and tell me, what's the most important money lesson your parents ever taught you? I'd love to see the wisdom passed down in your words. Now, one last piece for this section, because this one hits hard. You can't leave emotional security if you don't live it. Your nervous system becomes the template your family's nervous systems mirror. If you live with chronic worry, they'll feel it. If you live with calm assurance, they'll absorb that too. That's why part of planning your inheritance is planning your peace. Before you talk to a lawyer or financial advisor, talk to yourself. Ask, am I at peace with how I've lived? Do I trust that what I've built will matter? Because the tone of that answer will echo louder than the numbers in your will. Legacy starts with internal alignment. When your mind is clear, your message is clean. And when your message is clean, your inheritance becomes medicine, not poison. You've spent a lifetime earning your wisdom. Don't let it end in silence. The smartest inheritance isn't left behind, it's lived forward. If this resonated with you and you would like more of such content, be sure to click on the card showing on the screen.